hello, James. I assume that's the name I can call you, or
Yeah,
you have a preference, and you can call me by my first name if you like, Emiliano, or casual if you like to, whatever.
Emiliano. That's what it
Yes,
is.
yeah,
All right.
and you're from California, so I mean, the Latino vibe probably shouldn't be a like
Oh yeah.
foreign.
My wife is from Mexico. I'm actually
Aw-
fluent in Spanish, so
Awesome, that's really cool, dude. But yeah, I mean, the topics of discussion we're going to go ahead and jump into probably. I mean, whenever you feel ready, unless you want to talk about something else. I just want to make it easy on people because I think the thing that you and I were just talking about is like how people communicate online
yeah.
versus the ability to talk to finally someone face to face. We agreed
right.
to discuss abortions. I mean, because that's a big topic, and the violence from the right and the left. And I think we're going to have a lot of agreement. I mean, I don't think there's going to be like anywhere close to being a debate, but
No,
when people actually get to hear different perspectives, I think it'll make people have more informed decisions. And my main goal is to just get people to become more engaged because
right,
I think that's one of the biggest obstacles we have in this country. Everyone's on top of it when they're running for, we have a president, but everything else is just like, who?
right. Yeah, for sure.
But
Well, so and like what you might see from me is that, and maybe this will kind of explain how some of my opinions will end up coming across, is that like online, well, in real life, I'm like a pretty serious introvert. If I can not talk to people, I'll do that. But uh online is like to me a more interesting place to, because it's not small talk. You're only talking about the big topics or just straight up funny memes, right? That's
yeah,
basically all you do. And that's more interesting to me. But if my thing is I talk to people that are, more right or more left, and I'm always trying to talk them down, and they always confuse me for being hard on the other side.
mm-hmm.
And so when it comes to like my feelings, my thoughts about abortion and the Roe v. Wade are actually more complicated than what anybody wants them to be
Yeah.
honest.
Well, I assume the reason it's so polarized is because it went one way or the other. There was not a gray area with the ruling. So it's hard to be a centrist. You either are for, you go with that momentum, or you kind of find reasons to give more women to say. Because I think the best, in my opinion, way to look at it, I mean, because if you look at, the scripture, you can't accept evil regardless of what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And my personal view is like both sides are wrong because they're not addressing the underlying systemic issues. I mean, if you're
Right,
going to be pro-life and leave out the fact that you're allowing more kids being born into poverty, which are going to be exploited, and you're giving more ammunition for groomers, that's a fate that could be equally to, just a mercy killing in some sense. And I'm not saying I'm justifying that at all, but that's
right,
horrible. I mean, I think if you go to prison, you probably will be looked more, if you took out a kid, I mean, if you did something else to a kid, I think you would probably get seen more as an eviler person if you did that, like
right.
Jeffrey Epstein. But
So,
I'm
oh
not
yeah,
equating
geez.
them. Yeah, I'm not
Yeah,
equating them. They're both bad. That's what I'm saying.
right,
And I just feel that we need to build a better foundation and live by example to make people not go toward the abortion route.
right,
And just like consequence by the law, I mean, we've seen how that works with prohibition. People are still going to do it, and they're going to
right.
be more dangerous with their efforts to do what they want to do. And that's, I mean, I don't know. I don't claim to have the answers, but I don't think that's going to be the best way to solve the problem.
Sure. Well, so abortion is a complicated issue, because you have two sides. I think one of the reasons we don't disagree is because one set of people doesn't think it's actually a person, and one set of people do.
Mhm.
And while you have someone like me that normally I don't want to take away anybody's choice to do anything. I don't think the government should tell people how to live their lives
Mhm.
pretty much at all.
Yeah.
Aside from there's a few things we all kind of agree on. Don't murder,
Mhm.
don't steal,
Yeah.
don't kind of defraud and cause overt harm to people. And where we fall apart on abortion is the disagreement over if that thing in there is a person.
Yeah. I think if you allow, like, this is the part where you and I might even agree more. It's like the normalization of abortion is probably something we want to shy away from. And but to distinguish, just so we can prioritize not only the well-being of the fetus, the woman, I mean, and if the kids are born. So I think that's why words are good to make specific distinctions. And I know a lot of people might want to consider a fetus and a live baby the same because they're both live. And I understand that and I respect that, but I do prioritize that, because it's not the fact that I value, well, I do value a baby that's born. If I had to choose, I'm going to pick the baby that's born versus, if there's complications with the fetus. I mean, it's easy for me to prioritize something that's already born. Now, I don't think that's the ideal way to go, but if we allow, like I mentioned already, poverty, we ignore that.
So the strange thing about poverty. You don't have a lot of poor people like killing themselves because they're poor and they wish they weren't born.
Where are the suicide rates coming from? I don't know. They have drug addictions, and that usually goes into poverty because they don't value themselves.
Well, but rich people also commit suicide.
Hmm.
Mental illness is complicated and it's actually not tied to income or wealth, and there are, like, around the world, billions of people, magnitudes poorer than the poorest people in the United States, and they're very happy.
Yeah, and
They're not
abortion's
killing
legal over
themselves
there.
in significant.
Yeah.
I've heard, at least compared to like Europe, we're actually looser on abortion than a lot of Europe.
I wouldn't be surprised by that. I mean, I don't know what specific country you're talking about, but they have healthcare that will allow them to have a family. It's not a cost because having a kid's a financial burden. And I think that's the number one reason. And I know that's bad.
That gets back to like killing people over money. That's
what war does. I know that's what not funding social safety nets for the elderly, for leaving vets homeless. So that applies to a lot of things.
So a lot of people, so that kind of like pointing to some other problem to justify this horrible act doesn't fly with me. No. Because if you go, vets don't have good enough health care, I'm like, I think vets should have 100% the best health care and we should pay it. That they served our country, they put their lives on the line, carte freaking blanche for them. I'm not in charge of that. You want to get in the line and advocate or lobby for better vet healthcare, I'm with you side by side. I generally don't point to other problems as a reason not to solve this problem.
Yeah, I understand.
With the other, what I can say is, like, I believe that that we should have generally a more holistic approach to solving abortion. It's not a matter of just, first of all, I don't think shaming anybody into compliance works ever. I think it's a lot of why you have a lot of pushback against the quote unquote old guard and conservative morality, is because shame was the name of the game for thousands of years. And I don't think that it's useful or helpful to blame these women who are really being sold that their babies aren't real people and that it's not a big deal. And especially some women that have been brutalized and become pregnant by, rape, incestuous behaviors and whatnot. That in those cases, I have a pretty clean and clear, like, that it's totally understandable to perform abortion in those cases. And I think what's missing from the conservative side, I don't identify as a conservative because I feel they generally lack compassion for like the reality of different circumstances.
Did they distinguish for all those points that you just pointed out for like exceptions, like due to being assaulted, due to, other factors that might be acceptable to have abortion according to you? Is that something, because I haven't really looked into the abortion issue that much.
There are, when I kind of get into this online with people that are left, they kind of point to this or that other conservative that's got a bill that has like no exceptions. Like, I think the recent Texas bill had no exceptions for rape. And I'm like, okay, I wouldn't throw the bill away, but I wouldn't have written it that way to begin with.
Mhm.
Let's stop the majority of ridiculous abortions and then lobby to amend the bill to get exceptions back in for rape and incest and, you know,
Yeah.
10-year-old. I don't
I
know.
would
You know what I mean?
probably align with all what you said if we had a rubric system to like hold people accountable. I mean, what are the factors for people wanting to do it? There's a financial reason. I mean, even if you're in the middle class, having a kid is going to put you in poverty. I mean, just like childcare, insurance, and
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not making excuses, but that is an incentive for many people to just do what they do, and people just don't adopt. Like we always use that as a solution, and there's a lot of kids who are just belonging to the state, and I don't
It,
have an answer for all that, but
it's so adoption is better than
mhm,
an abortion. We need to make it easier for people to adopt. It shouldn't be like a huge financial, it shouldn't cost what it costs to adopt, but you also have to have, that's tough too, because you have to have a way to vet for predators.
yeah.
I understand that.
It's a pretty big vetting process from what I'm aware of. I don't think it's like liberal when it
Yeah,
comes to
it's
that.
pretty hard. But I think that they lean a lot on the cost
Hmm.
uh, versus, I don't know, deep psychological background checks, education checks, reference checks.
Hmm.
I don't know. I'm sure it's difficult, but yeah, I
And
think it's
kids are
probably
expensive,
difficult
even if you
in
have
the
to
wrong
adopt them,
ways.
apparently.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I
I
know. I
think,
had one.
mhm,
So, and that's the thing. So that's the thing when people make it seem like it's so hard to not get pregnant. I had one kid,
mhm,
and he's almost 19,
mhm.
and I'm done. I did, you know, we decided early on that we were done, or we were pretty sure we were done. So we used fairly conventional protection over the last,
What was
since
your
he was
determining
born.
factor to just say, hey, I'm done?
Well, so no, it wasn't
Nope.
that. Full disclosure
Okay.
is, so I got married at like 21,
Hmm.
and then a little over a year later, our son was born. And when my wife was pregnant, she was like dreadfully ill the entire time,
Mm,
just as
okay.
miserable as you could possibly be. And then so she's like, nah, we can't do this again. And I was like, well, okay, cool. So he'll, you know, we'll be 40 when he's 18. And then I really liked that idea, you know,
Hmm.
being done at 40. But then also, even because it did come back up again, but to be honest, at the time our marriage was not great. And I was like, I can't bring another kid into a marriage like this. We got to hold off. Things got to get better.
Yeah.
And
I
then,
mean, was it like finances? I'm not trying to proud. That's
oh
like my
no,
under, okay.
I had
It's all right. You don't have to
deeply,
share.
no, it's, I don't have like a privacy thing.
Okay.
I think that we learn more about humanity by sharing more, not by holding up everything back.
Sure.
But I had like deep untreated depression and
Uh,
social anxiety, and I had just the worst kind of jobs for that kind of mental. Yeah, I was on disability at
Healthcare,
one point. Yeah.
healthcare issues. I
Well,
mean, that's
it
costs. I
wasn't
mean,
it wasn't like the cost associated with health. I'm in California. Medi-Cal has been around for a long time.
mm,
So even when I didn't make money, I've had decent access to healthcare. Um, it was just, it's just I was untreated, and when you have deep untreated medical issues, and they're, you're, you know, my wife is from another country where they had almost no education on mental health, so
mm,
she just thinks you're being an asshole, you
got
know.
you.
um and we were both very young, you know.
Yeah.
By like, I wouldn't recommend that people in our exact circumstance do what we did. That's not a textbook. This is the least, you know, risk inducing. It was just, we're both very stubborn, strong-willed people, and we were very young, we were immature, and then also, you know, untreated mental illness on my part. That it just, we were just, it just was bad. We ran into each other a lot, you know.
Well, it's good that
um
everything seems to like it's worked out. I mean,
well, yeah, so eventually, and this is another thing that I would, you know, this is why I'm a big fan of therapy and psychiatry, and the appropriate and careful application of meds. um, because those things, and it's not an overnight thing, but those things helped. And a lot of actually what I'm trying to do when I'm out talking to people online, in
mhm,
terms of trying to talk them down regarding the other side, comes from what I learned in marriage counseling, actually,
gotcha.
which is a lot of times, you know, when you're arguing with somebody, you want to be right and you want to win that argument more than anything. But if you want a relationship to coexist, sometimes you got to let love be more important than being right.
Yeah.
Now, there are lines to that, right? You can't let somebody murder somebody in the street, to take it to an extreme. It's not, anything they do goes. A person has a right to kind of protect themselves, and not every relationship needs to go on. But that's kind of my approach with like the right and left. It's like, we don't have to destroy each other to keep ourselves from being destroyed.
Well, I just think the fact that people aren't even engaged. I mean, they only get engaged right toward the very end, and that's when it's very polarized because the politicians, when they debate, they
Yeah.
model that behavior. So, we had that with Trump, and the Democrats, they're just saying Trump bad, me good. I mean, there's not really any nuance to like policy discussions, like how infrastructure is just failing us, and then that's like a big fail from both sides of the aisle. And like you
Right.
said, when we just discussed vets, you and I both agree on that. And every
Yeah.
party says, oh, let's take care of the vets. And they don't.
They
So
don't do anything.
yeah. So and it just amazes me because, being from Texas, most of my friends on Facebook, they're pretty conservative or significantly more conservative than I am. And I get along with
Sure.
them. It's not like a big issue, but it just makes me scratch my head and just like wonder, why do you keep on voting for people to implement policies that go against what you believe? I mean, uh, I understand, and then that's what I'm going to get at right now, because I'm pretty sure you're going to say, "Well, Biden, that's the thing." They're thinking presidential politics. If you look at state level, Beto,
Right.
which I don't like, but he gave a suggestion: we should hook up to the grid that's not ERCOT, so we have that security.
Right.
That makes sense to me, and I don't like Beto, but that's a good idea, and that
Right.
affects everybody. And right now you have Ted Cruz, Abbott, and then, some of the people that are around in my area, Congressman Michael Burgess, just luring coastal residents and businesses to Texas when we have an infrastructure for energy that's just hanging by a thread. That makes
Right.
no sense to me. So
Right.
when people are just like, we can't let a communist socialist Beto be, I'm like, dude, I'm not even thinking that way. I just want power.
Right.
And then that guy had an actual idea that's logical to me. And I don't like the guy. But why don't people think that way? Because they're polarized. And that's
Well, yeah, no, that's the problem. It's like people they refer to it as tribalism, but people are so interested as in their team winning, like they've lost any concern for like integrity.
yeah.
I don't know if you saw this this kind of like expose confessional that Lauren Southern just
I'm
uploaded.
familiar with her. She's on Destiny quite a bit and they talk all the time. I don't know if
So
you know who Destiny is, but she's a guest frequently.
off the top of my
with them.
head, well, no. So she just kind of like, kind of, to use the YouTuber term, spilled the tea on a bunch of the corruption and backstabbing in conservative activists like Milo Yiannopoulos and some other people that are
Yeah.
from, I don't know, I can't remember. I think some of them are Breitbart associated and some other ones.
Yeah.
And I was just like, if this is how bad it is, that side doesn't deserve to win.
Yeah. I mean,
even if like, they were forwarding something that I believed in, like anti-abortion, for example, if that's how they, if they win through backstabbing and corruption, he doesn't deserve to win that way.
yeah. I mean, I just keep objective mentality, and then my personal beliefs stay here at home because I always don't put my religion. I mean, I'm pro-life at home. I mean, I've never had an abortion. I don't plan to. If I have another kid, it's a blessing. But I'm not going to use what I do at my house to govern because that's just hard. You're governing a diversity of different mentalities.
Right.
And here we are, emphasizing in Texas a whole bunch of religion where you can look at a country that's more atheists, and they're more closer to being Jesus-like than people here in the state in the Bible Belt. So I'm just like, God, there's so much hypocrisy that's so blatant, and people just don't bother to entertain that. And I used to be a right winger. I used to be a conservative. So I can see when people are BSing me. Like I look at, like you were mentioning Lauren Sutherland and the people you mentioned, I'm like, these guys aren't legit. I mean, they're just trying to make a living, and can't blame them. But yeah, they're just carnival barkers.
I can kind of, if you're making your living off of morality, then I expect you to be moral. If you're making your living off of being, team good guy, I expect you to behave like a good guy.
But at the same time, this is when self-accountability comes with us. I mean, there's always going to be someone that tries to deceive us. It's up to us to have that conversation like you and me are doing. We can always point fingers and blame, well, this guy said this, that's why I'm doing this. That's why I'm going to vote for this, and that's why I hate gays. That's why I think everyone should go to jail. I mean, putting laws that are going to incarcerate more people for abortion is silly to me because we already have an incarceration rate. It's going to be a bigger cost. It's not very conservative. So it's just going to create more problems. So I mean, this is not a biblical philosophy, but more the lesser evil, you know?
Right.
I just feel like if you allow women to have the choice, but give them the options and slowly, you know, create those social programs that allow them to be financially stable. And a lot of people split, rather they're poor, rather they're middle class. Having a kid is expensive. It costs me $800 just for childcare for one of my girls. And we had two. So, so it's just unreal. Maybe that's affordable in California, but in Texas, that's like a mortgage.
Money's money.
Yeah. And then, yeah, that's what I'm saying. And then it's like, even if you're middle class, and then the expenses of feeding them, if they get sick, insurance. I mean, it's just like one of those things where you're put in a desperate situation. And when you're desperate, you'll do desperate things. And it's not always moral. And, you know, me being a conservative with that mentality and that background, I've always told myself, I've always valued my kids, even when I was in high school. I hadn't had a kid, but I was like, you know what, that's going to be me. So when I finally meet a woman and I finally have a kid and become a father, that's my legacy. So I felt that at a very early age. Might be ego, you know, whatever. But I wanted to cater to that. So it was never in my mentality. So it's not like I promote abortions. I want to live through an example. So hopefully when people see me talk like this, they'll be like, yeah, he's for women's rights, but he does want people to prepare, you know, for the burden, the financial burden, because it stinks and it's only getting worse.
Right. Well, yeah. But I think though, you know, the thing with first of all, this is something you really go into when specifically with whether you get pregnant or not. It's just not that difficult of a thing to control, assuming we're talking about a consensual encounters.
People get drunk, man. I personally have some stories with buddies, and they're just like, "Whoa."
Yeah, you know, I got a problem with alcohol in general. Alcohol, I think I'm more anti-alcohol than almost anything else. I just see alcohol making so many things bad. Like, I know people like to do it for fun, but it's also right. You know, what happens before you sleep with someone you didn't mean to. It's also what happens before somebody kills somebody else. Like so many bad things have alcohol at the beginning of it.
Maybe here in the
maybe
US,
that's a different
I mean,
subject.
I don't know. Germans probably like their beer and they're like, hey man, we don't kill anyone. You Americans are crazy.
Oh man, they almost took out all the Jews. What are you talking about?
Well, that was a long time ago. Yeah, they don't recognize that part anymore. They're very open to
don't talk about that.
Well, no, it's interesting because not Edward, but I had another German friend and we discussed that very topic. And I go, aren't you patriotic? Because it was the 4th of July and I was studying abroad in Mexico. And he was like saying, no, I'm not patriotic. The last time we were patriotic, bad things happened. And I was like, wow. Because us Americans, I mean, we value our patriotism. I mean, you can see on my YouTube channel, I got my American flag and, you know, it's part of our culture, you know, and, but at the same time, I do see that criticism, you know, from a person that came from a background where their history due to excess of like, you know, over looking their, you know, their greatness, they thought they're better than everyone else in another race and they did what they did.
Well, yeah, no, and I get that because there have been a number of times. So like, I don't know if this happens if you go to church, but like around the 4th of July in church, you start singing some of the patriotic songs. And for several years, I've actually like have just not felt comfortable singing those songs. Just because I feel like our country doesn't live up to that. To be honest,
I like structure.
That's the goal, you know. And but I definitely went through a period where I was like I'm just super uncomfortable being this patriotic. I feel like we're not looking at ourselves.
I agree. I mean, I kind of resonate with what you say there because me being the mentality I am, I'm very structured in how I think. You separate church from state. And when the church starts getting political, they're going to get taxed. That gives them their ability to not be taxed. They're not involved in politics. Once they want to have a say on what we fund as a government, you should tax them. So they're not following the law of the land. And I think if you're a church, you got to live by example. And that's
Well,
my,
they're not being political. They're just singing songs like America the Beautiful. They're not making policy statements. But
what if you're like a Mexican and your family was deported by America and then you go to church and you're just like, oh, America the Beautiful, the people that took my family away. I mean, it makes some people feel uncomfortable and they're
well,
legal.
and that would be a
have that
reason, for
experience.
example, that would make you uncomfortable to sing those songs. And actually not exactly that, but kind of that, well, kind of that did happen, because when my wife was first here, she was undocumented.
Yeah.
And so
And
when
people
we
would look at it and
applied,
say, stand up and sing it.
they may, oh, no one did that. You know what's weird? There's a weird disconnect. People don't understand what their policies mean on a ground level basis, because everybody that knew me, and in church, you know, church people tend to be more conservative than not 100% of the time, but for the most part. So everybody that would have been from a conservative background, when my wife got sent back to Mexico to reapply, and she had to be there for almost 2 years.
Yikes.
With our son, who was an infant at that time, everyone was confused. You know, everyone was like, what, your wife doesn't get to stay? But that's your wife. I don't understand. So like, people don't understand what they're voting for too often.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, especially when it comes to immigration. I see a lot. I mean, that's how I got in so many heated discussions with family on Facebook.
You see, in one second, my dog got stuck in here and she wants to get out. She's going to start making noise.
Well, right now, I just want to go ahead and just clarify what we've been talking about. We've been discussing. Oh, your meeting will end in 10 minutes. Okay. All right. So yeah, I don't know. It's telling me I have 10 minutes for some reason. I don't know. I might have to like not re-record what we just said, but do another recording. I don't know how Zoom's working, but if that's the case, I can just fix that. But yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I guess with abortion, I just wanted to go ahead and just talk to the camera while you were gone. I think we pretty much agree on certain stipulations, but you know, I'm a little bit more liberal when it comes to just giving pretty much women, as of right now, until we have like a good foundation to, you know, hold them more accountable. But as of right now, with the cost of living, I feel really guilty dictating what a woman should do. That's just how I feel. So I think you might disagree with that, though.
I like, I want to agree with it, but it's like, it's a person. We're taking away somebody, that person that isn't born yet, that was going to be somebody's best friend. That was going to be the love of somebody's life. That was actually going to be the purest form of love that mother would have ever experienced in her own life.
I don't know. I work with a lot of people that are
like their kids.
I work with a lot of I mean, I'm not saying that's not true. Yeah, it is. But on the flip side, there's a lot of pain and suffering and neglect that also comes from that. And especially if you're a single mother. And then the thing is, you're going through a process where your body is going to change and you're still expected to get an income. You're not going to be able to claim the fetus for tax exemptions or anything. So it's tough. And I think it would be a good idea first to make sure we have a foundation to support that process so they could have that love. Because I don't think that's just something that we could just rub a genie and boom, it happens. It's all pretty.
We do have a foundation. It just could be better.
Oh, we have a paternal death rate, the highest of developing countries. I don't know if that foundation's where it needs to be, man. That's just like
no, like I said, it needs work, but like, and it's look, I don't necessarily want to do it through the law, so to speak. What I would advocate for is for people to come to this on their own.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm actually not comfortable with the Supreme Court having overturned Roe v. Wade.
Yeah.
Like, I agree with the principle, but I don't know that I agree with the method, because it was a power play.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I agree with the principle and I apply it to myself and I try to give that example to people. So, and I realize not everyone's going to be in a financial standing like where I'm at. So I can't really say, hey, you know what, I did it, you can do it. I mean, I've seen the pain of people having to endure being a single parent and their lives are miserable. It's just like, you know, I'm not saying they should have done what they should have done. And I'm not naming anyone specific, but in general, you know. Yeah, so it's just like, you know, being a public servant, I've seen quite a bit of circumstance. I'm just like, Wow. And it just creates a cycle too. Because I mean, you hear older people saying kids these days are like, well, if you don't help resolve the problem, what do you think kids are going to be like the next day and the next day and the next day? It's a never ending cycle. It's a problem.
Right.
We don't address it. It gets worse.
Well, and I think, I think the solution is at a societal level, we have to value things that last longer than a paycheck,
Yeah, I agree.
you know?
I mean, you like your healthcare. It's significantly probably better than what we have here in Texas. I mean, that's a perk living in a more liberal state, but there's perks being in Texas as well, as far as regulations are concerned. You have a little bit more freedom. But I think
Right.
that's slowly going away now because what they prioritize is corporate profits over like quality. It's like to
Mhm.
make money. We have this grid that's privately owned. It's not government regulated like it should be, but they're
Mhm.
just going to do not. They already price gouged us to make the money they lost in the wintertime.
Right.
Wasn't that sufficient to make sure it didn't happen again? And Texas is not a place where it's strange to just get all hot all of a sudden. This is something that's nothing
It's
new.
hot every freaking year.
Yeah, so I'm like, for us to normalize that and accept that, that's
Yeah.
inexcusable.
Right.
And there's elderly people that need AC. There's kids that need AC. There's people
Yep.
in the hospitals that need AC. So it's just like, this is unacceptable. What's your rubric for failure? I don't care about Joe Biden. I don't care about Trump. Our state leadership needs to be held accountable now.
Yeah.
So
That, and actually, I think that for now, the state solution for abortion should be enough for everybody that wants it, whichever way. The
I
one
mean,
thing that I kind of, the one thing that I think everybody should actually probably realize is that if you're in a blue state, you're still going to have just as much access to abortion now as you did before. Nothing changed there.
mhm.
If you live in a red state, you have a population of people that the overwhelming majority of them have been waiting to be able to restrict abortion because it goes against their personal values.
Yeah, but that's the thing. I think it's a very close neck and neck desire to have women's rights here in Texas. It's not like overwhelmingly one side or the other.
Is it
And
not?
no, I mean, yeah, we have I mean, because if you think about it, Texas likes to brag about how much money they make. Well, those are all the blue urban cities, the regions, the blue regions that make all the revenue. There's few Bible Belt counties that produce the money in our state, but our
Mhm.
politicians always take credit. Well, see, you move to red, you're going to be better off. I'm like, well, that's Houston, which is blue.
Mhm.
Dallas is blue. Fort Worth turned red. San Antonio is blue. The Gulf area where we get all the ships to come in, blue. So I'm just like, I can keep on going, but it's
But
not the.
there's a
Mhm.
huge population. I mean,
Yeah, it is.
geographically, Texas is huge.
Oh yeah.
What is the population that's spread out compared to the cities?
I don't know. That's a good question. Houston's pretty big, dude,
I
and
wouldn't be,
Dallas.
I wouldn't be totally opposed to bringing this down to the smallest possible governmental
Mhm,
increment because, like, let's just as a stupid example, let's say there's 1,000 people that live off somewhere
mhm.
in a place, and those 1,000 people don't want abortions. Shouldn't
Yeah.
those 1,000 peoples not be able to have no abortions occur within their own midst?
I mean, it would be nice, but I just don't know how realistic that would be. That's
Oh
why
yeah, it's
it's
totally not realistic, but like in terms of respecting other people's values,
that's why I
you know,
think we could probably go the more moral route once we offer a foundation, because it'll be easier to hold people accountable. If you don't really give them any help and just expect them to pick themselves up by the bootstraps when the cost of living keeps on growing and still want to have that same rubric that people had decades ago, it's just not the same. You
well, what I mean, I like in my like in my case, I basically told my son when he got old enough to start being stupid, I was like, look, if you go and be stupid and you get some girl pregnant and you don't want to raise it and she doesn't want to raise it, please let me talk to her and I'll take the baby.
Yeah,
Um, and what I would like to see is that kind of approach from basically everybody, you know?
that'd be
Uh,
ideal, but that's not the people don't have two parents. People don't always
if I
have like
was one
supporting
parent,
parents.
it was just me and not my wife and my
I know.
I think that it is we have to prioritize families and families have to stop bastardizing people that do something they don't agree with and saying,
Mhm.
well, it's your problem, F you.
Well, I
We
mean,
have to
I
say,
agree.
yeah, you know, bring it here, then I'll take care of it. If you can't live life in this way or that way, that's something, but we're not going to kill a baby over it.
Well, I mean, like prioritizing families. I mean, why do you think the middle class is shrinking? Why do you think people are choosing not to have kids? I mean, it's just not economically feasible like it was before. I mean, one of the common questions I get from relatives, conservatives and more liberal, but they're older. They're like, "Are you going to try to have a boy?" I'm like, "Are you serious?" I'm like, "Dude, I already have two. You imagine, you know how much it's going to cost to have three?" I'm like,
Sure.
"No, man." But that's
Well,
that mentality, you know?
and it makes sense to be like, I don't want to have more kids than this, and then take the appropriate steps to not. But like, for example, I'm 41 now. If
Mhm.
if I did wake up pregnant tomorrow, not me literally, obviously, my wife, then I would still have that kid, even though it wasn't my plan.
Yeah, that's admirable. I mean, there's more people that need to do that. So I'm just looking at my computer. It says less than a minute. So just in case we get cut off, I'll just go ahead and send you a link again. I think they give me like increments of time.
Sure.
So, but yeah, okay, well, we'll go ahead and move on. I think we agree pretty much on abortion. I mean, I think I kind of see that you might be in agreement kind of for like having more systems to encourage family, because when you look at the holistic data, families are shrinking. You got Tucker Carlson saying that. So, I mean, there's an economic reason for that, in my opinion.
Yeah. I actually think if we valued family over, all of the video games and all of the cell phones and all of the other material stuff, we have more basic stuff that we
All
have.
right, sorry about that. It's just Zoom. I don't know if there's like a settings I could utilize to make sure it stays consistently, because I don't remember having this issue with my other conversations, but it's all good.
I don't know.
It
It's
is
all
what it
right.
is. No, it's all good. But no, I understand your logic, but I don't know. I mean, would you say your upbringing was middle class or in poverty?
Little bit lower than middle class,
Hmm.
but not abject poverty. I
Yeah.
was, raised by a single mom who was a school teacher,
Mm.
just me and my sister. And I had one of those like absentee dads that like never paid child support or anything like
Yikes.
that.
Yeah, that's very
So
admirable of your mother. And I can see your strong opinion about like valuing the life of a kid. If your mother did it, it's a lot easy to understand why you have that mentality. And yeah, I mean, the reason I asked that is because, I mean, we were like blue collar, lower end blue collar. My parents had to work two full time, two part-time jobs and one full-time job. So
yeah,
I mean, I was always alone since I was in second grade. I'd have to learn how
yeah,
to cook and do all that stuff. And
yeah,
so it was just, since didn't have a parental figure, I mean, just my personality, I didn't get into trouble. So they got lucky.
yeah, yeah. I know
And
what you mean.
I didn't get into trouble, but I was very ignorant. And you said teaching somebody how to fish. Well, what if that person's never seen a fishing pole? That would have been me. I learned, I mean, the one fortunate thing I felt like I had in high school is just having really good friends
Mhm.
that were, they knew I was like an introvert, and they knew that I was like not as social. But for
Yeah,
some reason, they liked they valued my friendship,
right,
and I'm still am friends with them right now. So it's just like having people that you could just talk to and all that, and then just it made me more confident and more aware of things.
right,
And I'm partying a lot when I was younger. So
right, right, right,
it made me
right,
more confident and all that to just be who I am now.
right.
So it got me out of my box. But my point is, it's like I was so clueless, and I can't really see myself at that age really knowing how to do what I needed to do. I didn't even know about financial aid when I went to school. I got
Right.
education. I went to a two-way high school.
Huh.
So
Well, that's what when I talk about when I pull on the metaphor, teach someone how to fish, I don't mean hand them an instruction manual and say, there you go, kid. I mean, we got to get in there with them. This
mm,
is a fishing pole, like literally from the ground up. Like my idea, like I've had this like stupid pie in the sky idea because I have kind of a problem with billionaires, right?
I do
Because
too.
I just kind of inherently don't trust them.
I don't either.
Um, and I, I have this kind of theory, and I've told this to people, and I'm probably wrong, particularly as it portrays to the amount of money. But I've told people, I'm like, you know, I have this feeling that Oprah could just, like, for lack of a better word, save Oakland, right?
They could.
And I'm like, if you, but like, if you, I feel like if you just almost outside of the government, like independent of the government, I feel like if you had somebody that could come in with like $1 billion and be like, one of the problems in education is not having enough teachers for the amount of students. And when you I mean, I had a kid that resisted being educated, you know, and he didn't come from a culture that told him that the world was going to screw him over because of his skin color. But that type of culture is prevalent in Oakland. I don't know if it's 50-50 or 60-40 or vice versa, but it's a significant amount because it shows, basically it shows in like test numbers and school performance and things like that. So I'm like, what helped my kid, for example, is because he actually has ADHD. He was able to be in like kind of a smaller group. So I'm like, get more teachers in those classrooms. All right. Next step, get somebody in there could run a business, but they don't have the capital to start one. Okay, put the capital in, get a business coach and a CPA to help this woman or man open and run a local business in Oakland, for example, right? And do
small
do this
business
with as
opportunities
many,
instead of just subsidizing billionaires to maintain their power.
exactly. And so that's kind of like my idea. Like I feel like with $1 billion, you could do some significant turnaround in a city like Oakland, if it were focused in that way, not on freaking running through all the politicians that have to like approve it. Literally just a couple of people, like I would, you know, like someone like Thomas Sowell that really understands economics. That would be somebody that you would bring on to consult and how to kind of distribute this around, and somebody that understands small business to come work with some small business owners and then some CPAs. And these people making very like minimal, like this is a calling, you know what I mean? This is not what they're doing to make a ton of money.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, the thing is, it's really hard for most people to understand is how much money $1 billion is.
It's a freaking tremendous amount,
and
but it's also can go real quick.
Well, that's probably true, but what people do to become a billionaire, I feel like a lot of bad things are done.
I have a hard time believing a billionaire got that way without freaking bodies being on the floor.
Yeah. I mean, that's just an obscene amount of wealth.
I do think that there's a few legitimate billionaires in
Warren
terms
Buffett.
of, I think they got there. No. I think Oprah is a legitimate billionaire.
Yeah,
right?
maybe. Yeah, I
Kind
guess
of changed culture in a way that I think maybe no one has. I don't like Mark Zuckerberg, but Facebook changed everything. I don't like Bill Gates either, but Windows changed everything.
Yeah.
Like these people like really changed the Western world in the United States.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that might be genuine, you know, like how do you quantify that? I'm not sure. That might be genuine, but generally aside from something like that, you're a billionaire from like railroads or oil baroning or pharma. Yeah,
I don't know, man. I mean, if you're a billionaire and you get cheap labor from China with some poor working conditions, I don't know if they have proper ventilation. People probably might drop dead.
That's why Steve Jobs wasn't on my list.
Yeah. So, I mean, Elon Musk was like making people work for 7 days or 1 day off.
He's not on my list either.
Yeah.
Funny story about that. So I do the workers' comp. Well, I'm the workers' comp contact in my company. So the auditors come to my office, and several years ago, I got the same workers' comp auditor that Tesla had, because our office is like 20 minutes away from there, maybe a little less. And she just told me that place was a nightmare.
Yeah. And I've heard a lot of like buyer's remorse and all that. I mean, I wanted to get a Tesla. I wanted to like Elon Musk.
Sure. But yeah, no, his freaking factory, at least at the time, this was probably 7 years ago, give or take, when that happened. But at the time it was bad. There's so many injuries. So many freaking
Because
injuries.
they're trying to meet all the date of the production of all the demand they had for their e-cars, and they weren't able to do it. He was just like a hype man, and he got the hype, and people wanted cars, and he wasn't able to meet quality control to produce so many vehicles. And now we have competition with other car companies producing e-cars, and he was against government subsidies, but yet he was taking them. So there's just so much corruption between billionaires. They cut each other's throat. And I just think the mentality of somebody that has that much money, for the exception of Oprah and some of the people that you mentioned, I just think they see us as cattle, and they're out of touch with like what happens.
Well, I actually think Bill Gates sees us as cattle too.
I probably will agree with you. It's like,
but I think that his contribution overall is so genuine in terms of just earth shatteringly changing how things are done. That it's like, yeah, that might have been legitimate, how we got there.
Well, there two things can be possible at once, that negative aspect, and then the contribution that they, did to help society. And that's like how I feel about big pharma too, because so many people want to incriminate them. And I'm like, I'm not disagreeing with you. I don't trust big pharma, but they do make drugs to save our lives. So at the same time, we just got to be more vigilant, and then not be so divisive against each other.
Right.
And so, but anyways, so I think we pretty much agree on like the violence aspect. I don't think you disagreed with like my solution for, to prevent more gun violence or violence in general with liberals, helping with the poverty. But I don't think we really articulated a way to address the violence on the right yet. I don't recall, unless you can refresh my memory.
I think that, well, it's because I think that the solution to the one on the right is the same as the one on the left. I know yours is a little bit more economically driven. Mine, I mean, that might be part of it, but it's more socially driven, in both senses. You have people or communities that are just neglected and or abused in some capacity, and it's mental. Honestly, it's mental illness.
So you would suggest more regulations to get a firearm? I
want,
based on a mental diagnosis.
Like, I'm cool with like a background check. I'm cool with like, I'm cool with like a psychological evaluation too. Even though you can learn how to cheat it, it's just one more step to kind of minimize the risk. But in general, it's not just that. What I would like is for, when you go to school, you have to have vaccinations. You have to, I don't know if you have to go to the dentist, but you have to have certain health things in place. And I would think that, one thing that should be added to that is like, psychological evaluations, once a year. It doesn't even have to start in kindergarten, though maybe it should, because I think it's so much worse if a small child is being abused. I would just like to catch these kids that are struggling. When my kid was in like third grade, he had a friend that got him into trouble a lot because that kid had like behavioral issues. And I was meeting with his teacher, and the teacher's like, yeah, so I told him not to like hang out with that kid. And I was like, you just took away that kid's like one maybe sanitizing friend.
But it's for the benefit of your own child. I mean, unfortunately, that's an executive decision that you have to make to benefit your own kid. I mean, I have no problems prioritizing the best interests of my child at the expense of somebody else. It's going to be a bad influence. I mean, like I'm very objective.
Third grader. Talking about like a third grader that just is like rowdy.
Yeah. I mean, if they're going to cause physical or emotional trauma, or if they're going to interfere with the learning, the well-being, or the safety of my kid, I'm just going to be objective. I'm not going to be, mindset to like have revenge. But at the same time, it's just like, I want to produce a person that's going to be successful. And if there's somebody that's going to be an obstacle for that, I'm going to be an advocate for my child's best interests.
Well, see, but, to kind of pathologize another small child in that way, to where maybe they're not as good at paying attention. They have too much energy to just sit still for the amount of hours that they're in school.
You need more teachers to address those needs of that specific
push more boundaries. Those types of kids, like, taking away their friends is not the right solution. Yeah, you might need more teachers to like help them operate and stay on task. I'm down with that. But
I mean, you could have friends in the
that
socializing setting, like
that
when they're
kid
in
is getting
recess.
that kid
But
was being forced into isolation.
no, I don't think he should be isolated, but
That
he
I
should
mean,
be
when
to a
when you
person
when you
in a
take
group.
away his friends and he's not allowed to
You're
socialize,
not taking away his friends if you allow them to socialize on extracurricular parts of the day during school, like during PE, during music, during
well,
library,
that's what I
during
mean. She
recess.
told him not to hang out with them. That's
I
what I'm
mean,
saying.
but my issue is like when you have to do schoolwork, because there's a lot of issues that just so many teachers, one bad kid is equivalent to 5 kids. And, if you have more than one, it's just like, it's a numbers game. And you'll have other parents that'll complain. It's like, my kid doesn't know anything. And when you have to constantly put out fires in the classroom, you're not able to focus on everyone. And it's not the fact that it's an emotional, like, connection
Well,
you have with that bad kid. It's just like it's a need they need to have
what's the
better
trade-off we
experience.
potentially are making at a third grade level? So we isolate this kid, and maybe your kid gets an A in third grade math and history,
Mhm.
or and that kid grows up,
It
continues to be
depends. Like you
isolated,
said, you need to
shoots
have like a
people,
process to see what's wrong with them. Do you
but
want to just give them medication to solve the issue? And I'm like wondering if you're cool with over medicating kids too.
no,
I
I
mean,
don't like to I
yeah.
don't default to medication for kids, but I think that kids naturally socialize themselves,
Mhm.
and I'm not for isolating them and kind of labeling them. If they're not, we're talking about basically rowdy,
Okay.
you know?
I
We're
do
not
have a
talking
solution.
about like a bully.
I do have a solution. Our whole education system is whacked. I don't think we should have any assessments, like standardized assessments, the amount that we do, because I do believe that it would be nice to have a socializing aspect of schools like at earlier age. So hopefully
Yeah,
when they get to third grade, they have that discipline to value school and consider it being a fun place. Because if
right.
you're getting assessed when you're in pre-K, taking tests and having to know all your letter sounds, all the letter identifications and all your numbers up to 20 or what, 10.
Right,
And
right,
then
right.
same thing with kindergarten. It's not a fun process. So I would not object to teaching kids to just socialize and how to
Right,
behave appropriately with other people's children. So I
right.
think that would be more beneficial instead of just, you know, a test like
But the
benchmark
thing
testing, the
is
STAR
that I
test.
think a lot of people don't realize, and yeah, I would get rid of standardized testing too. If for no other reason than a lot of kids just can't test well because it's like it psychs them out.
Yeah, I mean, I
But
understand the value of the data, but what do other countries do that perform better than what we do? Do they do
my
all that standardizing testing?
my thing is the report card. You know, to me the report card tells me how the kid's doing.
Mhm.
I don't need a specific test that somebody else, I don't know. I don't know, that's like a rabbit hole.
Yeah, no,
But
no,
like,
no. I mean, I imagine it's super confusing. I've seen report cards now, and I'm just like the rubrics they have for academics versus what they were for us. It's a
right,
little bit more complex. So how can you support your kid if you yourself don't really understand all the academic goals your kids need to achieve? So under the current system, in order to actually make sure the kids get the full benefit of under our current system, you need to have more teachers. Because unfortunately, the academic progress of kids is going to be affected by behavior problems. And I don't
right,
think it's fair for either one of them because they have needs, they have energy, and that's normal for a kid. But there's some kids that can do it and some kids that can't. And the kids that are disciplined to do well and like school under that rubric, they
right,
deserve attention too. And they get ignored a lot because of behavior issues.
right.
But that's not
That's what
saying,
that's what I'm
and,
getting at.
and then
They get neglected, they
yeah.
get isolated socially because they're like blackballed or
Mhm.
blacklisted or whatever.
Yeah.
Teachers encourage other kids not to spend time with them.
Mhm.
But kids kind of, they're like a little community, they'll self-regulate for the most part. The only thing you really have to watch out for is like aggressive bully behavior.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if they're just a little too rowdy, if you got some skin knees, occasionally somebody cries because you're playing dodgeball and someone got hit in the face, like that should be normal, and
Mhm.
kids should
Yeah, yeah.
learn to shake it off.
I mean, I have my daughter as an example. She was in second grade. I mean, there was a havoc inside the classroom. And I was just like, she didn't learn anything. So what am I supposed to say as a parent? I'm like, well, there's no classroom management in this particular classroom. Am
Mhm.
I supposed to be cool with that?
Well, not that either.
No,
That's
and
different.
and the thing is, you know, there was like a COVID spike here in Texas. So after the Christmas vacation, she was taking classes online, and my wife got a new job where I allowed her to stay at home. Significantly did better because the teacher was able to do her job.
Yeah, but
So
was the classroom management issue because there was one kid that was acting up and
no,
just
there's
soured
multiple
everybody?
kids. I mean, she attended a
Yeah,
school where there is a lower income. It was a Title IX school, so the majority of kids, over 80 something percent, were free reduced lunches. So I mean, that's again how poverty can be a systemic issue, and it's not judging anyone in that position. It's something
right,
that we need to be transparent to define the problem so we can fix it, because those kids
right.
have needs and they deserve help too. And I'm not like trying to sound cold, but I'm
How many,
objective.
do you know how many kids were in the classroom?
Like 25. And during the pandemic, so everyone's like close together, and it's like people
Yeah,
aren't wearing masks, and then the poor teacher's overweight, so she's like on the spectrum of like, it could be deadly for her.
yeah, right,
So
right.
her ability to care for her job, it's just like there's so many factors going to that woman's head. So I genuinely feel bad for her, but teachers are overworked, and I genuinely feel bad for them. And then, how do I help my daughter when there's so much going on in that classroom? And I'm not going to be okay with all that. I mean, I have to do my job as a parent to put her in a situation where she's going to be able to thrive academically. I can't allow her to fall behind.
Yeah. Uh, but again, that problem was not her just playing with a so-called problem kid that distracted her.
Yeah.
You had
Oh
like a
yeah.
whole classroam falling apart.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I
And
mean, I'm assuming that kid might have just been the only bad kid. If he wasn't,
yeah,
the
in my example, you're talking about one kid that was
yeah.
like a standout for difficult behavior, and then ultimately the teacher's solution was to keep the other kids away from him.
Oh,
And
that's
I'm
not
like,
good. I mean, if you
that
blatantly take that kid, I'm saying if you already had like a foundation that can cater to that individual, that
right,
allows him to socialize still, because that's an important part of school.
yeah.
So, but at the same
But
time,
that's what happens with problem kids. They get put off to the side.
so do
And
the smart kids too. They get put off to the side as well because the teacher has a big workload, and then the
well,
smart kids become a problem with behavior because they don't get challenged because the teacher has to cater to the kids that are behind.
yeah,
So,
yeah. But so what I'm getting at though is when that kid, for example, comes up in the gun culture of the right,
okay, I'm
that
sorry.
isolation is a black hole that they can sometimes here's this is what I'm saying. These are the type of situations we need to look for, because I think that some of them are in there, is what I'm getting at.
But I think the argument that most right wingers would say is like that's their right, dude. I mean, they're not breaking any laws. Do they got a criminal offense? So I've debated some people that actually informed me about gun laws. They were good faith. And me being from Texas, I mean, I've had guns. I mean, I'm not against them, but at the same time, I'm like, we need to have a dumbass clause for the laws of guns. So it's like we can't allow dumbasses to have guns. I don't know how we're supposed to make that work, but
I don't
it,
know, because
it's
you're
just
I mean it's not so much that they're not intelligent as they lack what we would normally call common sense.
yeah.
You're talking about the people that kind of end up shooting themselves, right? Or they
There's so
shoot their
many
friend because they
factors.
didn't realize their own gun was loaded and that it was
I,
pointed at
yeah,
somebody.
I guess that was a little harsh language myself, but there. But when people murder innocent people, I will be biased, I guess,
I
especially
mean,
with
like
especially with the school shooting. It's gonna
the
be hard to be sympathetic with somebody that does something like that.
and totally understandable, but there's almost not a law you can pass for that.
I know
You
it's a hard
you
issue. I don't know what
you
to do.
that's a problem. That's what I'm saying is like the solution is in the people in our society that are neglected. It's always them. It's never somebody that was in like a healthy, happy family that felt like they had a place in life.
Yeah, and I
you
think
know
that's like a remedy that the left has mentioned, more mental health,
hmm
and I don't think the right
well,
really
you know
advocates for
what,
that
the
that much.
right mentions it, but mental health funding constantly gets cut, is what I've been hearing recently. And then nobody, this is the thing again, now this is the thing that actually pisses me off about the right. Whenever they talk about guns, they're like, this is mental health. I'm like, then freaking put some money into something on it.
Yeah, they'll throw
That
some change, but they never fully fund a program. So they could just say, hey, it failed. I mean, you can't pay for people's well-being, and you got to privatize it.
it's freaking ridiculous. I mean, honestly, I mean, this is like public safety. I mean, this is a public safety issue.
Yeah.
Uh, Honestly, what they should be doing is have like some of the best psychologists just strip mining everything they can about these people so that we can figure out what were the signs.
Well, I mean, it's like when I talk about gun regulations with people on the right, they go always to Chicago, they go to New York, they go to California. And I'm like, okay, well, let's look at the data. I just had a conversation with somebody on the right, said, can you please fill a source? And it was like from the world data. And then it allowed you to interact with the United States to see each state's
Yeah,
fatalities due to guns. And
yeah,
Texas is more, significantly more fatalities by guns than all those states they mentioned. I mean, yeah, they're high per capita for that city, but when you
mhm.
look at the holistic data where that gun culture is concentrated at, I mean, that's why it just makes me a little bit more biased and more like, I say dumbass, more like a, because I'm like, dude, look at the data. It's like you ignore it. It goes in one ear and out the other ear, and ignoring the problem's not going to solve it. And
Sure.
I think one of the things that might help renew the conversation with gun laws with right wingers is to like look at the Constitution and interpret it. Because I don't think the founding fathers would probably be like, oh yeah, we want our citizens to be armed to the teeth, because the firearms back then wasn't like it is right now. I could be wrong, but
Well,
also they wanted well-regulated militias because the states in the South wanted to use their well-regulated militias because they knew the North didn't approve of slavery. So when
yeah.
they had slave revolts, they wanted to be able to handle that. So it was built upon controlling people that were
So, I
enslaved.
mean, the concept of the Second Amendment was so that the basically so it would be easier to have a revolution if the United States turned to tyranny. To be
Yeah.
honest, that's really the point of it, is they wanted its citizenry to be able to take back the power from the government if it ever became what they were themselves seceding from.
I think the debate, but back in the when the founding fathers is like that they
However,
wanted they didn't they were thinking of, should you leave it to the states or be a federal government regulation, because the South was worried about if they left it to the federal government to dictate it, they wouldn't be able to police slave revolts. So they allowed the states to make those
yeah,
uh,
but just
issues
talking
more.
about the Second Amendment and
Mhm.
the general intent, and taken together with the documents, the reasons for the basis of declaring independence in the first place, it's so that the people could take control of their country
I
from
guess.
the government. However, even if that's what they intended, it's okay to be like, is that really the right thing to
Strategy.
do, though? You know what I mean?
I mean, if you already have like a cynical way of just like, okay, well, we're going to make a country, we're going to be proud of it. Let's make sure we can overthrow it. I mean, it's just not like having an optimistic mentality for success. But I understand the logic to it.
Well,
But
it's real. I mean, it's realistic based on, they studied their history a lot more than we did,
yeah, well, I mean, 60
as
something
a
years later,
society.
we had a civil war. So it wasn't like a good plan.
Yeah.
So,
Well, probably because they didn't sort out slavery at the very beginning,
well,
and they
that's
should have
the
gotten
thing.
rid
I
of it
think we should
then.
be honest about gun rights. And I think that was the main issue, the motivation to have guns in the first place, to maintain people that were slaves. But
I
I,
I don't. I just disagree with that.
yeah, I mean, what would you do with a gun other than just hunt and protect yourself? I mean, I don't think the normal person had any idea what the government was doing. They didn't have a lot of people that had a
Well,
high literacy rate that could revolt against their country. They didn't have a
if
car to
I
go.
were if I were a Jew in Nazi Germany, I
But we're
would be
talking about the
repelling.
United
I'd
States.
be
I mean,
repelling the government. But you see that's the point. Like at any time, something can happen. I mean, what the Bolshevik revolutions,
mhm.
uh, you know, it at any time governments just start taking people out.
Yeah,
Some political power just comes in. I mean, how many there were multiple genocides of the 20th century. It wasn't just the Jewish Holocaust.
true. And then
You know,
was it the Koreans or Japanese that had to protect their community from some like people that were riding? I think it was in California. I forgot what it was. And they, yeah, I'm all for that. I'm not for like not protecting your property, the well-being of your family, but just
right?
to like go to extremes, whichever way, it just seems not strategic, to me. I mean,
Like I would be here. Here's what I'd be down with in
because
terms
right
of
now, do you think the
gun
people with
regulation.
their guns right now can overtake the United States? I don't think so.
Uh, if you did it correctly, yeah, because you're gonna have two things. You're gonna have splits in the military of people that don't want to turn their weapons on the military.
That's why they've
And
invested in
if
drones, man. They're just going to
if
push a
you
missile, drones.
if the government uses missiles on its own people, there's other countries waiting to take us down.
Mhm.
And if they did
That's a good
something like
point.
that, someone's going to sweep in and take advantage of that.
And you know, the people that want to defend their country, is that going to be in their best interest
And
too? I mean,
realistically, I don't think that, based on today's kind of environment, which is horrible,
mm,
I don't think that it's like 90% of the US population repelling just the government. I think what's more likely is you have almost a middle split. You know, I'm not sure which way it swings more or the other, but you're
mhm.
going to have somebody making a power play.
Well, that's
Um,
well, like we're trying to address the culture, and the culture
yeah,
is carried through tradition, and the Constitution is what a lot of right wingers see as their traditional values. That's why I feel like to get to the heart of that culture, you need to discuss the ramifications of just like utilizing it to overthrow your own government, because it's so many like hypocrisy. I'll see like don't tread on me, and then I'll
right.
see support blue lives on a bumper sticker for a
Well,
car.
but
So
you're looking at like in terms of like, you know, when somebody on the right goes and shoots up a bunch of people, you're looking at mental illness and be like, oh, this culture produces that mental illness, or if I'm understanding you correctly. But
mm,
it's kind of like, you know, there were Christian sects that would like beat themselves as some kind of form of penitence.
yeah.
It's like, oh, all of Christianity's questionable because this one sect beats themselves, you know, and that doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess I'm doing a bad job of like trying to make the connections, but with the gun culture the way it is, it lends itself to a way a person with mental illness will have easier access to guns. I mean, with the lack of regulations and all that,
Yeah,
because
if
if
we
you're in
can
the gun
figure out
culture, if you're in the,
how to wrap around that, I don't have a problem with that.
yeah, because if you have a gun culture, you're going to have people with mental illnesses in that culture. If you
Sure.
just like allow more ways to have access to firearms, which I feel a good idea would be to raise the age level of owning a firearm to 21, because if you were to do that, that already puts somebody that's 18, that's already in high school. They're not going to more likely go back to that
Dude,
school because they're not.
but honestly, if you do that, I'm gonna go buy my kid a gun just out of pure defiance because that would piss me off. I think if you're 18 years old and you can vote for the president and you can be sent to war and you can be drafted, you can own a freaking gun.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I'm
If
just
you want to
tossing, I'm
change some of those
brainstorming.
other things, maybe it's something else to talk about, you know. But the you know, owning a gun is like it's just such a fundamental right. You know, the problem is we outsourced our physical security to a police force, which by the way ends up treating us like crap most of the time.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't suggest taking your gun out to a police officer.
No, I don't. But like if we weren't dependent on them, if we felt comfortable to defend ourselves and we weren't dependent on a police force, we wouldn't kind of be having the same conversations.
I don't know. That would just support vigilantism, and I don't think that's a good idea either. Because people aren't trained. Are you trained to go infiltrate a crime scene? I mean,
I mean, it would come, I mean, it's more down to personal defense, you know?
I don't think people are Rambo,
I
man.
think, I
I think we
think,
have
you
to have
know,
well-trained people to create
I
a
think if
culture.
if somebody's trying to rob my home or assault my
Ah,
wife,
of course, of course, of
you know,
course.
but in terms of like, you know, who's going to go after the mob,
Yeah.
yeah, that should go to a police force,
Mhm.
you
We
know?
just need to have more regulations for accountability with cops. I mean, I was in law enforcement. And I think they do a lot of stuff to help remedy that. I mean, depending on the police department,
Mhm.
they try to hire people with more education,
Yeah.
and they try to hire more women. And in the academy, they were like open about it. It's like, we try to hire more women because they're less likely to be an asshole. And I was like, oh, well, that's, I mean, it's a known problem within the law enforcement community, but it's
Mhm.
not something that's easy to fix, because once you have your bad apples, I feel like the worst enemy of a cop is a bad cop. There's a lot of toxic behavior in the police departments as well.
Right.
I've
You have
seen
one
people
bad
get,
cop and it invalidates a
yeah,
hundred.
I've seen cops get bullied by other cops. I'm just like, man, so imagine if he bullies another cop, what's he going to
Yeah.
do to a regular civilian?
Right.
They tried to do that to me. They looked at me. It was somebody from the SWAT teams, like looked at me and he just looked me straight in the face. Says, "I don't like your effing ass."
Yeah.
And he looked at me. I was like, and the thing is, that's when I was a right winger, and I was like, "Oh, cool! I'm going to meet the SWAT team. It's an honor to shake these guys' hands. They're military. I was like, I was a young man that idolized and looked up to him. And when I had, it just shattered me. And then when I'm not used to being bullied, and and when I do get bullied, I respond accordingly. I'm not a pacifist, so I looked and I was like, I don't like you either. And now he just like, but he was a bully. And they have their own little crowd and they isolate themselves from the other cops, sitting there alone. So it just sucks. It's like there's so many serpent codes out there.
That isolation, whenever people are isolated, man, it gets dark.
Well, they were
the more that we
the
can
good guys.
the more that we doesn't freaking matter. You can be good your whole life and then one day break bad.
That is a good point.
That's another thing that, by the way, makes it hard to address this issue through law. I think, gosh dang it, dude. I think we just need to be more sociable to people. I think we need to look out for people. I think we do a bad job. We just let people go to hell. You look at like another example of this that maybe is less polarizing because it's not a talking point right now is homeless people. There's so many of them, but there are also people that have been neglected by society. And we just have a bad habit of when things don't go right, we go, it is just too much work.
Yeah, I mean, it is work. And that's the thing that I think a lot of people don't realize about the truth. The truth is boring. That's why they want to make it look like they sensationalize one side or the other side, because to actually do some critical thinking of like how to solve issues, that takes work. And there's a lot of details and reading and actually discussing stuff. I mean, it's not engaging to most Americans. I mean, I talked to them like, who are you going to vote for in the primary? Oh yeah. Who are you going to vote for in the city election? I mean, are you going to watch the school board meeting? I mean, you got everything online now, it's like people are just not as engaged. That's why I try to do what I do. And in closing, I guess one of the things we just discussed was like how to address the right wing issue with guns. And I think you made some really good points as far as like addressing people that are isolated. And, mine was just to like talk at the heart because, I'm around a lot of right wingers and they like to reference the Constitution, just talk about the debate a little bit, because I think I had a book with Elie Mystal and he talked about like, he's a lawyer and he was talking about the constitutionality of the Second Amendment. And he made some good points and I can't articulate as well as he did, but I was just like, dang, man, it was that the main motivation to be armed. And to be honest, my personal opinion, I don't think an armed citizens can take out the United States. I just don't think that's realistic. And I think we might disagree with that.
I do. I disagree with that. It's, guerrilla warfare has proven to be effective.
Well, because of the fact that I think our leaders are globalists. They're not patriots. They don't care if the United States falls. They'll still.
I think there's something to that.
They're not going to, they have global interests. I mean, they're going to win because they don't live here. We do.
Right.
And a lot of right wingers say so many people are soft, and there might be truth to that. So when actual warfare happens and you see your family getting gunned down, you're going to submit.
Right.
So, I mean, the brutality of war is crazy. So I don't think that's a good idea to just think to overthrow our country right now.
I don't think it's a good idea. I don't support violence as a solution. But, guns are something you really, 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 really never want to need and not have.
No, I agree. I'm not against taking them away.
Yeah.
But to just to
fight I'm not culture. Against taking them away.
No, I'm not. I'm against regulations, and it seems like you were too, to address like people that need to be recognized earlier for being alone. I don't. That's some kind of a regulation. I'm sure you wouldn't give them access to a gun, so that's regulating right there. But that's tricky because if you're a person with that mental illness and all your family has a plethora of firearms, you're going to have access to them.
Right.
So that's, I don't know. That's why we got to attack the heart of the culture, in my opinion, to have those debates.
Mhm.
And I'm not in a position where I can articulate as well as I could. Hopefully some people that are on my Facebook, they'll be like, yeah, you're wrong about this. I'm like, okay, I can see to that. But at the same time, why do we have so many gun fatalities in Texas? What's your solution for that? Does that matter to you? Is your liberty take priority over people's deaths? I mean, you're not overthrowing the government there. You're just allowing more innocent people to die.
Well, I can only speak for myself, but
Mhm.
I would rather die than take away other people's liberty.
Man, I value my life too
I
much.
mean,
I'm
that
selfish.
was something that a lot of us used to think, give me liberty or give me death.
Platitudes like that, man.
Part of how we got here.
Nah, I disagree with that. I mean, that's what, just think of it this way. The people in power will tell you that, but they're not going to advocate that principle for themselves.
I advocate that principle for myself. I advocate it.
Did you
I
join
have
the
no power.
military?
Did I?
Mhm.
No, I'm not disciplined enough. But
That's like, it's
it's
easy to
like,
say.
but being a part of the military is the opposite of liberty.
Well, the reason, yeah, that's kind of, but the thing is, the reason I said not to be a jerk, but I was like in mixed martial arts and, combat sports. And
Right.
people, when they actually get confronted, when there's actual conflict, your mindset will change slightly. But I'm not saying that's true about you, but I think a lot of
Sure.
people don't get that reality check.
Right.
And when you see other people suffer that are right beside you, I don't think that's something that most people can naturally say, oh, give me liberty, give me death. I just don't think that. And that's just my personal take on that. But I'm about to run out of time. I'm less than a
Yeah,
minute.
wrap it.
So, but yeah, hey, James, it was awesome having the conversation with you. I know we've always talked on Twitter, but
Yep.
I'll go ahead and
It was good
say
to talk to
bye
you.
and have a good evening. And we still got electricity here in Texas. So yeah.
Nice. All
All
right,
right.
man.
Have a good
Take it
one.
easy. Later.